Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Marwan Ahmed. I'm the CEO of US Halal Consultants. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. This is part of our monthly series webinars where we invite our expert consultants in different fields to talk about certain halal business concepts. Last webinar, we discussed the legal aspects of starting a halal business in the US for those who are in the US or coming from international business and want to establish themselves in the US market, halal market. And today's webinar is titled Raising Capital for Halal Business in the US, of course. And maybe if you're not in the US and watching this, you can also utilize some of the knowledge that will be shared today. Before I introduce our speakers today, I'd like to give you an idea about the US Halal Consultants. The US Halal Consultants was founded in 2020 as a result or a continuation of the Halal Expo and Summit that we've been organizing for the last 3 years. And the fourth version or edition will take place in October of this year, mid-October. The idea here for the US Halal Consultants is to provide business services for startups or established businesses in the halal domain that need support in legal issues, registration, marketing, finance, and in the halal concepts, whether it's food, cosmetics, tourism, finance, all these areas, mashallah, we have excellent consultants who can provide these services to you to grow your business, start or grow your business in the halal market. We are always surprised, or actually people we talk to are surprised when we tell them that halal is not just food. Halal is beyond food. Industry is a major part of the halal market. However, there are growing areas in the halal that businesses are getting into and becoming very successful. I was on the phone yesterday with a research institution asking them how much information they have about halal because they were advertising some kind of halal reports, and it was very basic, very minimal. I even had doubts that they have correct information because the report included fruits and vegetables. And we're not talking processed fruits and vegetables. We're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables, which makes me concerned that when somebody says fresh fruit and vegetable is halal, that tells me that the report is probably not very accurate. So I shared the concern, and they promised to talk to the research team and get back with us, because we do need a research in the halal market to understand the size of the market and to understand the consumer and the consumption of the halal in the United States. And we think it's very large. We just have to put the data together and share it with the companies and with government and organizations so we can all understand it and learn how we can maneuver and work with the halal industry in the US. This is it in a nutshell about US Halal Consultants. If you need our services, I will be posting during this webinar our website and link and email and phone number so you can reach to us if you need any further consultation. We always offer a free initial consultation to understand your business. Today we have two experts in the halal finance industry who will be talking about how to raise capital for your halal business from different sources. We have Dr. Gayath Naqshbandi, who is an Islamic finance professor at American University and US Halal consultant as well. and Shahid Amanullah, a managing director of at Foster Capital and a co-founder of Zakatify and founder at Zabiha App, and he's also a US Halal consultant. I'd like to welcome both of them, and I think we are starting with you, Shahid, to talk about the raising capital for Halal business. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to start this presentation.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and thank you for having me here. No, this is a very, very complicated subject, and the reason why it's complicated is because you have the general rules that govern raising capital for startups and small businesses, but the halal landscape is unique, and particularly the halal landscape in the US. So there are multiple different factors that go into that decision to raise capital and then how you raise that capital. First, I wanted to kind of explain for those who are not familiar what the differences are in the halal kind of business landscape. So first of all, you're talking about, and we're talking here for sake of argument, North America, US and Canada, to a lesser extent, the UK, Australia, Europe, but we're not talking about Muslim majority countries. So first of all, one raises capital to get an idea out to market and to get sufficient ramp up to quickly be self-sufficient and then eventually to return capital to shareholders or to investors. The complicating process here is a couple of things. One is we're talking about a total addressable market that is generally smaller than a mainstream business. For example, in North America, you're talking about roughly 1% of the population, and that 1%, unlike other places like Europe or the UK, is geographically distributed. So it makes it harder to kind of address that market, and this affects the way that you spend capital to reach those customers. The second thing is that, it's interesting. We've had conversations about the size of the addressable market in halal landscapes, and every smart analyst comes back with a fairly large number. And I think people who have been watching this landscape for a while are probably asking themselves, well, if there's a $20 billion halal market or whatever it is, how come we don't see all these successful businesses that have launched and are addressing that market? Part of it has to do with the ability to access that market. Part of it has to do with the unique business models of businesses in the halal segment. So just to break it down, there's two major categories. One is approaching the halal market segment as an affinity group. So for example, addressing Muslims with goods and services that reflect their identity. So by definition, that market is also constrained to that 1%. If you're addressing markets based on Muslim identity, people who are not Muslim are generally not going to engage in those. The second type of halal business are businesses that leverage Islamic values in one form or another. Those businesses, if done kind of universally, can have you can grow that addressable market from that 1% larger. So, but it does water down the identity aspect of it. So, it has its pluses and minuses as well. That all affects your ability to raise capital, right? So for example, if you are addressing Muslims as an identity group, then first of all, you have to make that case that you can address them, you can find them. Secondly, is that the people who are willing to invest in you are going to generally share that identity and believe that that identity marker is a business opportunity. And it's harder to find those groups of people. Most people who are investing, even Muslim investors, their primary concern is a return on investment. So they want to see the numbers work. And to take a chance on a business that's addressing 1% of the market versus a business that's addressing 100% of the market, you have to make that up somehow, right? Okay, so well, we're not addressing the entire market, but we're addressing this 1% that is a passionate 1%, and that you can generate quite a lot of wealth from just 1% of the population if you're leveraging that identity or those values in the proper way. If you're going after a value-based service that is anchored in Islamic values but is more universally targeted, then you have the chance of seeking capital from people who are less influenced by the identity marker and more influenced by the business opportunity and the differentiation that these values provide. So I've always, in that second, in the first bucket, you have, for example, companies that are uniquely focused on halal food, or for example, fashion lines that sell hijabs, etc. But on the other side, you have companies like Saffron Road that are clearly anchored in Islamic values, but they have a wider addressable market. And so if you're a company like Saffron Road and you can make that case that we can anchor in these Islamic values, but we can go broader, then you can do like Saffron Road did, is approach traditional venture capital to take advantage of that opportunity. So and especially if you present those values as universal, you're going to get that segment of investors that are motivated by social impact, that are motivated by kind of just value-based companies. On the identity side, it's much harder, right? So you also have to look at the landscape of companies that could possibly invest, or the investors that could possibly invest. On the side of the identity-focused businesses, I've rarely seen companies, and there are definitely exceptions, that secure anything beyond an angel investment from high net worth individuals that are focused on that. Now, there are some that are different. So I'll give you an example. Muzmatch, for example, is clearly very Muslim focused, but they were able to create a business model that was attractive to traditional venture capital, and they were able to secure traditional venture capital. But it's if you're targeting a small market niche, you have to be able to extract a higher per customer revenue from them in order to make that case, right? So Muzmatch was able to kind of make that case that we can actually have quite a bit of recurring revenue from a limited base, and that makes up for the fact that we don't have broad appeal. You can make a lot of halal suppliers, as the halal food space has grown. A lot of halal food suppliers, if you're supplying halal meat or processed kind of food products, you're also starting to be able to make that case because the addressable market is starting to prove itself. On Zabiya, for example, 20 years ago when I started Zabiya, I was able to find maybe 200 restaurants in North America that openly marketed themselves as offering one or more halal dishes. That number has gone from 200 in 1998 when I started that to at least in North America, probably around 15,000. And that, and when you look at that rise, that's not, you can't explain that rise by the increase in number of Muslims or anything like that. What really does define it is that in this particular market segment, this small group of people is spending a lot of money, and that these restaurants don't just serve Muslims. And so there's something else about the halal space that's attracting people who are not going into it because of the particular Islamic predilection toward halal food, but because it offers something different for the average foodie. So a lot of the halal restaurant scenes are actually proving to be very dynamic in what they offer their customer. Either they're offering their customer dishes that come from traditional kind of Muslim societies that maybe the broader population is not familiar with, or they're doing kind of interesting fusion takes that blend the cuisines of different people from different Muslim backgrounds and presenting that to the mainstream. So each of these cases will command a different kind of fundraising strategy. So for now, I want to move a little bit away from kind of the big ticket items, because I think the case has been made pretty clear that if you have a business that is catering to the mainstream with a product or service that's anchored in Islamic values but universal, there's a clear path to revenue generation and a clear path to venture capital or other investment in that. So I'm going to leave that aside for now. I want to focus a little bit more on the identity-focused businesses, because there's much more of a challenge there, and how to get around that dearth of investment opportunity there. As I've mentioned before, the primary place for investment is friends and family, maybe angel investment, as these companies kind of ramp up and move to scale. The problem with a lot of this investor class is that it is a generally more inexperienced investor class. So in many cases, they can't bring more to the table other than their investment capital. Unlike the venture capital firms that can bring networks and expertise to help accelerate you, they can bring in other investments from their partner firms that they know of, so that they can collaborate. It's much harder on the smaller scale. You get friends and family; they don't really contribute much more than the money. You have a higher risk with that capital, which I've seen many times. So there's a couple of strategies I've seen with these emerging kind of smaller companies in this space that are trying to leverage, and there's a considerable amount of opportunity in the halal space. So one is just simply bootstrapping, and I have advised many startups in this space to resist fundraising until the very last minute. Resist fundraising until you're able to create a minimum viable product or service. You're able to deploy it to a set of customers. You're able to get revenue from those customers, and then most importantly, get recurring revenue from those customers. Once you get to that point, it's really just about scaling, and it's much easier to make that case to an angel investor to invest at that point. Plus, they'll take a smaller percentage of your company when they do that. The second strategy that I've seen a lot of people do is crowdfunding. And traditionally, crowdfunding through platforms such as LaunchGood has helped to launch several businesses in this space. We are now starting to emerge into a new world. It's still embryonic, but a new world of equity crowdfunding. So unlike the LaunchGood or crowdfunding model, where you're essentially pre-purchasing goods or services to help fund the development of a company to deliver those, with equity crowdfunding, you're actually jumping in as an equity investor with, it could be hundreds of other people, because you support a particular idea coming to market. With the regulations having been kind of loosened, or I should say not loosened, but tightened and more formalized, and you have companies that are now starting to emerge in this space to help make that possible. There's one company called Versa, based in Texas, that is trying to do this as well, and they've got a good kind of path in front of them. That's going to increase the availability of equity from small-scale investors to some of these companies. Now, again, there's a lot of risk at this level, right? We're entering a new phase in general of micro investments. You've seen this with everything from Coinbase to Republic to all these different platforms that allow the average person to participate in what has been until now reserved for high net worth individuals or professionals. And that definitely comes with risk, but it also comes with a considerable opportunity, because if because the primary way of engaging Muslim audiences who are potential customers is the internet, is social media. You can also, your ability to raise money by portraying what you sell on social media and crowdfunding that equity is a good marker of your ability to turn around and use those same channels to sell to. And so I anticipate in the coming 3-4 years, we're going to see a lot of really good ideas come to market that way. And what we'll see happening is that it's going to broaden the palette types of companies that we're seeing in the space. Until now, because of some of these structural limitations of raising funds, you see things like t-shirt companies, you see things like individual pop-up restaurants, you see accessory companies, very small scale companies that are really just mom and pop shop type of operations. They weren't even created with the idea that they would scale into a larger business. And it's sad sometimes. A lot of the people that I mentor, when I ask them to imagine scaling to $100 million revenue business, they can't even picture it, and they never considered it. And that, and unless you can picture yourself growing to that, you're not going to shape your company to be able to do that, and you'll never get beyond a certain level, and you're never going to attract talent. You're never going to attract capital at that level and that scale. So that's one of the things I try to tell people is that, if you have this good idea, try to imagine it scaling to that amount so that you can kind of have a target in mind that informs the way you structure your business and the way that you raise funds. So in the short term, while I'm still going to encourage people to bootstrap as much as they can, and also encourage people to take their 1% idea and turn it to a 100% idea by morphing the model to have appeal to people who are not Muslim. And there are definitely companies that are able to make that pivot. One such company was Verona, who started making specifically clothing for Muslim women, but then they pivoted to modest clothing, and now over half of their sales are to people who are not Muslim, because it's not explicitly labeled that way. I mean, obviously the hijabs are kind of obviously Muslim, but the rest of their wear, you go to Macy's and you buy it just like anything else. But it definitely increased the addressable market. So I want people to keep an eye on the next 5 years of the equity crowdfunding space. Try to be a little tolerant of the risk that you're going to see in the first couple of years. And we saw this risk, by the way. We saw the same kind of shakeout when crowdfunding first started addressing companies. And there was a lot of failure. People were burned. You're seeing this also with just people using Robinhood or Coinbase or some of these other things and kind of taking these risks. But as long as we address it in a smart way, as long as we do our homework and make sure that these companies that are asking for your equity are professional enough, they've made their case, maybe they've actually brought a product to market and they've proven their ability to deliver, and you just do a gut check about whether this is actually what the market is asking for. If you can do that and participate in one of these rounds, I think that the landscape for halal businesses, particularly, and the challenge of raising funds for them is going to change dramatically in the next 5 years. So I'm looking forward to that. And so with that, I will, definitely, I'll stop, let my colleagues speak a little bit, and happy to answer questions after that.
Thank you so much, Shahid. Very informative, and I think some of the ideas that you shared are very important to people who are thinking of starting a business or continuing. I'm sure we will have some questions for you, especially with your background and knowledge. So everybody who's watching, bear with us, and you can post your comments and questions in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. Our next speaker is Dr. Gayat. I always mix up your last name, I'm sorry.
There are 25 million people with the same last name.
Naqshbandi. I should know
exactly.
I should know this one.
Yeah,
so
it's a Sufi sect.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you have a wealth of information to share as well. Without further ado, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm honored to be with you today. Actually, I like to speak for only 5 to 7 minutes because my focus is greater than the limited topic that we were supposed to discuss. But basically, I'm going to focus on raising funds for Islamic finance for the activities. And as a starter, I like to point out that I come from conventional finance for more than 25 years. So lately, I became an educator. So I have been advocating for Islamic finance since 2014 at American University. introduced a couple of courses, and introduced the first Islamic finance certificate in the United States of America. So with this kind of background in mind, I just want to say that you and your entity, your institution, started to discuss a very important topic that we should all focus on and work hard in order to activate and spread the whole system of Islamic finance. As a starter, I'm a firm believer, and I say that in international conferences in Islamic finance, that Islamic finance is not for Muslims only, it is for humanity. So I like to avoid focusing on how many Muslims are here and how many Muslims are there. So what is important for us to understand and appreciate the fact that in the United States, unfortunately, we don't have too many operations in terms of banks or finance entities that will provide the needed funding for activities that deals with, obviously, to me, the socially responsible business. And some people call it halal, but for me, it is socially responsible business. And we have to focus on that because it is important. Number one. Number two, let's face it, I am, with my due respect to some of my colleagues in the profession, I think we need to have a concrete base financial system by which we can provide the needed funding for startups and other businesses. And unfortunately, we don't have that. In the United States, we have a couple of entities that deal with real estate or a very limited sort of financing, cars and what have you. So if you go and review what's available in the United States, you will be a little bit shocked that we don't have really entities that will provide that. So what is the solution? The solution, we can look at the micro level. Micro level means simply that we have to activate the interest on major banks in the United States, I call them conventional banks, to open windows for Islamic finance. And again, in the meantime, we have to show them that there is demand, there is profitability, and so on. So that would encourage them. That's one. Number two, I think we have to, and under the leadership of Halal conference, to have some kind of creating a marketing effort by which we can encourage people, whether Muslims or not Muslims, to form sort of a community banks, investment banks, investment entities. And the least we can do at this time is to approach some of these private equity firms like Carlyle, like Blackstone, and so on, and sit with them and explain that to them. I know they know it, but for all information purposes, we have to educate them in terms of demand and the availability of future customers. And obviously, we have to convince them of the profitability of the venture. Definitely, we can always go to venture capital. And as you know, venture capital are very selective, and consequently, they focus on major projects and so on. So really and truly, I have a proposal for you. Number one, through our effort, we have to establish some kind of, let's call it, association of Islamic finance, or I call it, lately I start to call it alternative finance. I avoid the use of Islamic because of the Islamophobia and so on. So I would call it alternative finance association, by which all of us will work hard in order to figure out what is the best way, who is in the space of finance in the United States. And between you and me, we don't have to stick to the United States. We can approach some of the entities of Islamic finance in the GCC countries, like UAE, like Qatar, like Malaysia, like London, like the UK, and so on and so forth, to see how we can activate their interest in starting activities in the United States. So this is, to me, and I would support that effort extensively in terms of finding out sort of a cohort group that will get the data that we need. I mean, lately I was checking some of the websites on the Islamic activities or Islamic finance activities, and I mentioned some like Islamic Finance Guru, Amana Mutual Fund, and what have you, Wahid Invest. Another one is Ali Bank, and so on. We have to go and do some due diligence in order to really assess the competitiveness of these entities and whether they are really attractive options for our so-called clients in the United States. So in short, I hope we can focus on two things. Number one, we have to do our effort in order to gather information and data about who is in the finance space scene in the United States. That's number one. Number two, we have collectively to establish a database by which we can sort the information that's available to us in the United States and overseas. And I always encourage, and I do that actually on a personal basis when I go to the GCC countries, I talk about the possibilities of opening a window in Washington, D.C. So in conclusion, two things. Number one, I think we have to stick to alternative finance so we can gather information about other individuals, and let's not focus on Muslims because for different reasons, but really and truly the field of halal financing, halal investment, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you frankly, it is well received, at least in my case. More than 200 students so far at American completed my courses, number one. Number two, quite a number completed the graduate certificate in Islamic finance. And we all reached the conclusion that really and truly, we have to spread the word. And one more time, they tell me, and I agree with them 100%, that we are failing in terms of doing a good marketing job to talk about Islamic finance. And we can do that through these wonderful webinars. We can do that through writing our congressmen and senators and sitting with them and explaining that. And I do that from time to time because marketing is essential, number one. Number two, we have to educate the masses. Number three, as a conclusion of that, the most important Islamic finance vehicle that I know of is Mudaraba, which is a wonderful tool to help start up businesses. Again, that's in addition to Musharaka, in addition to other venues. And I'll tell you frankly, especially in the United States now, we have a great opportunity on the global level to propose and suggest and perpetuate the interest in something which is hidden for years, is about sukuk, Islamic sukuk. And to me, Mudaraba and Islamic sukuk will have a wonderful impact on raising funds for entrepreneurs, for small businesses, and so on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Riyad. Very inspirational, actually. I like your energy, and I like the ideas that you shared. Like Shahid, you both bring in different angles to tackle the raising funds and capital and handle Islamic finance from a different perspective. And I think that's very important because we need to look at things from different angles, not just from one lens. I do have a comment, probably a question. Let me post it on the screen. Okay, Shamila says, how can we contact you both, please? So on the banner in the bottom, it says, it lists our email and phone number for the US Halal consultants. Shamila, feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to help you support what you do and see what kind of services we can provide to your business. So it's in the bottom moving banner. You can find that. So you're welcome. So I have a question for Shahid while we're waiting for the other comments and questions from the live stream. And I think Dr. Gayat touched on that. Should somebody who's starting a halal business only focus on the Muslim community or not?
I actually think unless it's for very specific reasons, the answer should be no. And for many of the same reasons. So there's a couple, I want to back up a little bit. So, Islam is a value-based religion, and Muslim identity is a value-based identity. If we think that those values have benefit and purpose for humanity, then it makes sense that we incorporate those values into goods and services that serve humanity as a whole. I think that it makes sense on multiple levels. It makes sense, first of all, bigger addressable market. It makes sense because it makes our communities relevant to our neighbors, that we are providing something that makes their lives better. On top of that, is that it indirectly addresses a lot of the misconceptions people have about Muslims. If people see good things coming from us that benefit them, then it directly counters that narrative about Muslims who either we think just about ourselves or we are not productive citizens or whatever it might be. So for multiple reasons, I try to push people in that direction. Obviously, there's some things that we can't necessarily do with that, and that's fine. There's always going to be a market for smaller businesses that cover Muslim identity. But I think that the biggest power of this space is our value-based products and services that address the broader markets. Think about, for example, kosher food in America. To this day, the majority of people who consume kosher goods are not Jewish. And it's not that they just buy it happenstance. They buy it because there is a market perception that they are better, healthier, they're God conscious, all wonderful things that the broader market appreciates. As a matter of fact, for a long time, a significant portion of the purchase of kosher food were Muslims. This is prior to the time where halal markets had been properly established. I know I grew up eating kosher food because the nearest halal market was 20 miles away. And so that is the model that we need to follow. And as a matter of fact, even when you look at, I'll bring up American Halal again. One of their board members is one of the people involved with one of the largest kosher chicken producers in North America. So there's actually a common ground there, and a place where we can learn from our brothers and sisters that or in the kosher industry, how to create value-based products and services that address the wider markets. And I think there's space for both.
Great. A question for Dr. Gayat. You mentioned that there is no Islamic investment banking in the US, or Islamic banking, or alternative banking. What are the obstacles to start or establish such a thing? Is it a regulatory issue or is it a demand issue? Can you shed more light on that, please?
Well, thank you for the question. Excellent question. Actually, there are banks, one in state of Michigan, one in California, and what have you, but they are limited. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not a lawyer, but I have been researching this for quite some time. And you would be amazed, some of the states allow certain modes of finance, which is Islamic finance. And that is puzzling to me, that we don't have Islamic banks in the United States, even though the possibilities are there. There are certain sort of limitations when it comes to the FDIC regulations in terms of providing some kind of return on savings accounts. But to the best of my knowledge, back in 1998, there was a National Bank of Kuwait, I think, established a branch in New York, and then it did not last long, and then they left. I don't know why they left the scene. But the conclusion is, really and truly, there are ways and means by which we can have Islamic banks. And again, I will leave the legal answer to a legal authority to address. As you know, we have federal regulations and we have state regulations. So consequently, we have to assess that in order to be sure. But again, for the question, which is, I think, a wonderful question, I think the question is based on lack of marketing effort on our part to talk about Islamic finance. And definitely lots of people, they don't know that there are chances of having Islamic banks in the United States. And number two, nobody is telling them where they are.
Yes, thank you for the answer. And I think awareness and marketing, or if you want to call it advocacy, go hand in hand. I served on the board of an Asian bank when I was in Arizona, and I was surprised how little effort and money it took to establish a small community bank. And yes, it is time. I think it's overdue when there is an Islamic banking or finance or investment banking to be offered today in the U.S. There is no lack of knowledge, expertise, or funds in order for us to do so. It is about a will to do and putting the energy. So thank you for that answer. The question is for Shahid. You touched on the idea of when is best time to raise capital for your business. And I know many of us who started new business are excited. They think, everybody, of course, including me, think we have the best ideas and we are in a rush to share it with everybody and say, we need your support. And even sometimes people, when they have the idea, say, can we get into your business? When is the best time to do the ask?
Well, it's hard. You know, if you have done a business before and you have been able to execute and you've been able to deliver and you've got a track record, then I think it's possible for you to ask for money earlier than a first-time entrepreneur. You know, I'm very sensitive to not burning out the investment climate for halal spaces, because everyone's just, you know, it's still a new frontier for a lot of people. And what I don't want to see happen is, you know, a lot of businesses coming into this new space asking for capital, on goodwill and writing on kind of the pride that people have in this space, and then a lot of people having a bad experience, and then you've salted the earth for future businesses. So I don't want that to happen. And so, you know, this is why I tell people to be very reticent about raising money until they really need it. One of the rules of thumb I give to people is, you know, start something as kind of a side gig, and, you know, do it as a side project until maybe you're making like what would like be like half of your salary to live on. And then especially if there's an upward ramp with that, then maybe that's a good time to ask for, you know, a small amount of money that covers your deficit and allows you to spend all of your time scaling that from like half your salary to your full salary, right? Which shouldn't be that long of a time if there's a ramp that's going up. And it also just is, it much more ensures success for people. You know, it's hard to look in the eye of friends and families who gave you money, and then you turn around and go, sorry, you know, the business didn't work out. You know, these are things that people don't think about when they're raising money. You know, I liken it to, you know, unfortunately, there's this perception, particularly among first-time entrepreneurs, that it's almost like winning the lottery. Yay, someone gave me money. And I try to tell people, it's like, imagine a credit card with 100% interest rate. You know, that's really what you're talking about, because these people are expecting a return. They're giving you $100 and they're expecting $300 down the line. So you have an obligation, and this, just coming back to the values a little bit, people are giving you money as a trust, when they're investing their money in you, these are people's nest eggs. This is money that they're investing because they want to support their families, or they want to, they're investing it on behalf of other people. So this is a trust. You can't just treat this like free money and then spend wildly and then have nothing to show for it and say, sorry, you knew the risk, tough luck for you.
Right.
So there has to be this cooperative relationship where, you've trusted me with this money. I'm going to work my butt off to give you that return and to make this a success. And so I try to use that credit card analogy just to get people to not treat it like free money.
So having that said, do people need a business plan before they do an ask? Because I know most people don't plan to fail, but they fail to plan. And that's one of my favorite mottos.
Yeah, but you do need a business plan. But I think what's more important is that, when people invest, when I invest anyway, I invest in the person more than the plan. Okay. I can't care more about your business than you do. I can't have more energy about your business than you do. And so unless I see somebody who is, lives and eats and breathes and sleeps their idea, and I'm convinced that they're going to wake up in the morning wanting to address it and work until night to do it, not because they're obligated to, or not because I'm forcing them to, but because they really believe that it's going to be something that's wonderful. That's the kind of person I want to invest in, even if the business plan morphs over time. Because, I want people to make plans, but I also want people to be able to pivot, especially in a space that's new like this. There are very few people that have navigated this path to massive success. So that means there's multiple models to get to success. And I want you to be flexible enough to pivot when you get information showing you that this isn't working. Try going in this other direction. I'll give you an example. So one of my companies, Zacodify, is based on a premise that, I'll be honest, I don't think we've proven yet. And that premise is that people are going to want to plan their zakat year round and take an active role in tracking and monitoring those donations, or I prefer to consider them investments, in these entities, and not just do one big donation during Ramadan, right? So we've been doing this for a couple of years now. The jury's still out as to whether that habit change is there. Now, based on that information, we're going to pivot one way or the other, and that's a sign of a true, I think, successful business in this space. Can you absorb that new information and pivot and chase the opportunity wherever it takes you? So yes, definitely people need a business plan, but I also think you need to prove to the investor that you are singularly the person or persons in a team that can execute on this.
That's a valid point, mentioning that you do need to believe in the person before the business plan, because anybody can go to somebody and make them write a business plan for them. But if you see the person who's motivated and ambitious and, like you said, lives and breathes the business, it does make a difference, that kind of motivation. Back to Dr. Gayat, you both mentioned that the halal market in the US, especially in finance, what we're talking about today, is not and should not only focus on Muslims. One of the things we have discussed in the American Halal Council, a nonprofit organization that I'm on the board of, is the need for research for an American halal market, which we believe, we're convinced that the halal consumption or Islamic finance need in the US is beyond Muslims. And when we discovered the numbers and we put the data together, including the database, like you mentioned, we will realize it's at least double what we think it is. But again, this is only speculations. It means nothing until we have that research done. So what can we do between now and then, until we have that data? How can we prove hands-on practical ways that the average American will enjoy Islamic finance or alternative finance, like you mentioned?
Well, I'll tell you, when you before we jump into that arena, I like just to focus on what you just said about the need for business plan. Business plan is basically a roadmap. Without roadmap, you are going to get nowhere. That's number one. Number two, the two simple things are how much the project is going to cost you, and where you are going to get the money, and when I will be in a position to start paying or sharing dividends with your investors. It is as simple as that. Going back to the question, I think one of the areas by which, just to illustrate the point, I think you would agree with me, in the old days, I have been here for more than 40 years, but in the old days, nobody heard about even Syrian bread. Nobody heard about hummus. Nobody heard about baba ganoush. And I'll tell you frankly, why these people are involved and they insist on buying these things. Simply for two reasons. Number one, they taste good. Number two, obviously, they know that these are healthy food. So when we talk about halal food, I think one of the criteria which I think it will be helpful is to provide the content of that item. And that will sell it, because everybody these days, when they buy something in the market, they will look at the back and see what are the contents, and what are the contents. They include so percentage of sugar and so on and so forth, and that by definition will sell the product. And again, I can't help it but to illustrate a point that when we talk about Muslim or halal food and so on and so forth, we forget, or sometimes we try to ignore the fact that in this country of ours, in the last 30 years, we started advocating against smoking. In Islam, we have it from the beginning. You should not consume something which is hurtful to your body. That's one. When you talk about other issues in terms of liquor and so on and so forth, we start hearing only in the last 10, 15 years that you have to have a designated driver. Why? Because liquor is not good for you. I'm just citing two simple examples. But if we are going to sell product to the so-called the population, we have to show them that the food, that whatever we are selling them are healthy, up to the standard, and so on and so forth. And that will sell this product without a big marketing campaign.
I'd like to piggyback on Dr. Naqshbandi a little bit. I think he brought up some very interesting points, but I'd like to also gently push back on a few of them. So the first thing about smoking, everything you said is true, but one of the most interesting expansions of Muslim culture in the mainstream American space is the proliferation, and I mean proliferation, of shisha establishments in America. There's places where I didn't see one, and now I see 15 or 20, and I'm talking Texas, California, Virginia, everything you said about smoking is true. But think about what this means in the larger context. When people think about Muslims, part of their perception now is they're spending time in a Muslim cultural space and enjoying a product of that culture. And that's going to shape public opinion about Muslims. And it's through their purchase of goods and services that are informed by our culture. So as much as I completely agree with the prohibition on smoking, ironically, we have exported a smoking product that has been adopted by everybody, and everybody's enjoyed it. And that enjoyment now reflects a little bit on us. Second point I'd like to make is, you mentioned, hummus is a great example, but it's also a great warning sign. One of the things that I tell people is that when you see these cultural trends where something is going to move forward, you have to lead that. If you don't lead that, someone else will lead it. So if you look at Halal Guys, Halal Guys defined halal food in New York and took that segment nationwide, and they're leading it. They've defined it, they lead it. No one else is claiming that. Hummus is a warning sign. If we don't lead that market segment, then you see abominations. Astaghfirullah, you see abominations like chocolate brownie hummus and pumpkin spice hummus, and these things that are a bastardization of something that we hold very dear. And that's what happens when you let other people lead something that you should be leading, right? So that stands as a warning sign to people of how if we stand back, we lose control over that narrative. So those are kind of two introductions that I'd like to just kind of propose to you.
Thank you for that contribution, and I think it makes a good argument. I always say that two of the worst things we exported to the West as Muslims, or Arab if you want to call it, is hookah and belly dancing. So depends who you ask, of course. So yeah, this is where we need to lead the narrative, but this is where we need to write the story instead of allow others. And unfortunately, we see others sometimes writing that narratives, and we just follow because they invest more than we do in some of our popular products, and hummus is the leading products in that domain. So I'd like to wrap up our today's webinar about Islamic finance and raising capital for businesses, and remind everybody that we do this on a monthly basis, third Thursday of every month at noon, and every month we have different experts. We talk about different concepts. Let me see, next month's webinar will be about, that's June, that's going to be halal tourism. I think that will be a very interesting topic. We're also going to have the Halal Expo and Summit, which is going to be the climax of what we do every month, and we bring everybody together in one event in the mid-October of 2021. This is going to be in person this year, unlike last year when we had to do it virtual. This is going to be a hybrid where it's going to be both virtual and in person in the Washington, D.C. area. If you would like to learn more about US Halal consultants or hire our experts for your business, whether it's a startup or established business that needs to grow, please contact us. I'm posting the email and the phone number in the bottom, and we'll be happy to have a first initial complimentary conversation with you to learn about your endeavor and see how we can, help you grow your business. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank our both speakers, Dr. Gayat Naqshbandi and Shahid Amanullah, for joining us and give us their insight. This webinar is also recorded and it's available on our website, halalexpousa.com/US Halal Consultants, and our Facebook and YouTube pages. Thank you again, our speakers. Thank you for watching, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Welcome, Islam. Thank you.
Thank you.